Good evening. You with us right here on ET Now, and we're following the big breaking story all day. This is really the big reform of the NDA government that has unleashed a slew of reforms in a bid to attract the top dollar inflows, opened up defense and aviation sectors, allowing 100% foreign investment, and has also hiked FDI cap in pharma to 74% via the FDI routes. Of course, there's many more things that has been done, and over the course of the next half an hour, we're going to discuss and debate all of that and a lot more. I have a very eminent panel joining me right here on ET Now to discuss and debate all of that. Dr. Arvind Virmani, Shaugato Bhattacharya, and of course Naushad Forbes. Thank you very much, each one of you, for being with us. Dr. Virmani, the senior statesman on this panel then, what do you make of the FDI inflows? We're almost wooing the top dollar. What about timing of this move?
I see this basically as a continuing cleanup and reform of the FDI. I don't think there is any kind of big break in this policy, but it's good because the problem always with reforms is that there's a tendency to get complacent. So in that sense, I fully welcome it, and it's basically focused on the non-automatic routes where a continuing cleanup has been going on for some time, where there were multiple conditions. These conditions are generally indicative of a lack of knowledge and understanding. So just because somebody objects, you put all these conditions in there, and then you figure out over time what on earth these things mean. So the government, I think, has very rightly and consciously tried to look at all these conditions and see what exactly they mean, and to try and get rid of the unnecessary ones and keep only the ones which will have some substantive meaning.
Fair point indeed. Naushad Forbes, you represent Indian industry and your businesses are going to be impacted. But what do you make of government's decision to open the floodgates to FDI, opening up sectors that have for long been kept under control due to the security bogies like aviation for 100% FDI in aviation, 100% FDI in actually defense? Sectors that have so far been considered holy cows, untouched, but still sectors that are being opened up. What do you make of this?
Well, we strongly welcome these decisions that have been taken today. It's indeed, as Arvind mentioned, it continues work that was started earlier on by the government, and this is really welcome. And I think the liberalization of these regulations reflect both the commitment to reform, to openness, and it reassures investors that the direction that we are moving in as a country is exactly right. I think taken together, the FDI rules can attract significant new investment. Many of these conditionalities that Arvind referred to just now have acted as a brake on investments. They've acted as, they cause confusion. They leave ambiguity in what exactly it means to have state-of-the-art technology, for example. By getting rid of these kinds of ambiguous terms and removing these conditionalities, I think it sends a very positive and strong signal that FDI is welcome, and it's welcome across the board in many sectors which were earlier considered okay, no, this has to be protected. The point is, how much was actually coming in by way of FDI under all of these conditionalities? Not very much. And so I think by actually getting rid of these conditionalities, it should open up many new sectors and make it a much more positive environment.
Fair point indeed. It's going to open up many more sectors. Shaugato Bhattacharya, come in on that. In your own view, you'll have to give it to the government. Some radical decisions have been taken today, and I will question the timing of this move in just a bit from now. But I must first begin to talk to you about, does money flow into countries like India because of macroeconomic fundamentals, the market that there is, or does money flow in depending on what the cap on FDI really is?
No, I think it's a combination of everything. I think this is completely the reforms that you saw, the liberalization in FDI. As my colleagues also mentioned, that this is part of a process which we have seen the government carry out over the last couple of years, increasingly, progressively opening out various sectors. I think this is very much in line with the government initiatives on ease of doing business. Secondly, I think one of the reasons why there is a lack of investment capex from the debt side, one aspect, I mean, there are many aspects to this. One aspect was the lack of equity. And FDI being an equity type of money, I think serving to bring in FDI in many of these sectors, I think will gradually over a period of time bring in debt funds as well. So that will help capex grow. Some of the things that I've seen in some of the sectors that we see in the liberalization of FDI, I think this is very much in line with the risk perceptions of those sectors, whether it be whitefield, greenfield pharma projects or defense, where there's a certain amount of risk, where there's a significant amount of risk inherent in the investments. You have been given 100% FDI consideration. So all of this seems to suggest that the government is moving with, as we heard, I mean, a large amount of transparency, which ties in together with the tax reforms that we are beginning to see. So to your initial question, that is this just FDI that makes? Obviously not. I mean, there are a whole bunch of issues regarding the ecosystem. But my sense is that we are moving together in one direction in many aspects of the ecosystem.
All right, we're moving in one direction in making India the top destination as far as global money is concerned. But Naushad Forbes is going to leave us early, and so I must throw my volley of questions at him, Mr. Forbes. Let's begin sector by sector. 100% FDI in defense will essentially mean that the big global daddies of defense who did not so far, were not comfortable in transferring technology, can now come here, set up shop. What does that, however, do for the domestic defense industry? The domestic guys who are also a part of the domestic defense manufacturing, they obviously don't have as deep pockets as some of the global guys do, or the cutting edge technology that global giants do. So is this in some way a distorted field as well?
I don't think so. I think what we will actually see happen is we will see two things actually happen. We will see foreign companies come into India on their own for certain products where they wish to manufacture in 100% owned companies. But I think we will also see more joint ventures with Indian firms taking place, maybe in selected products where India could become a base for manufacturing for world markets and not just for India, and where a local partner can make the product manufacturing that much more efficient and effective as a result of doing it in a joint venture. So I don't see it as negative for local industry in any way. India has been for many years the world's largest importer of arms. And it would be very nice to see some of those arms being made in the country instead of being imported. I mean, it's certainly in our country's interest to have local sourcing of all of these, instead of importing the product from a company, let the company come here and make it in India. It's much more attractive for us.
Mr. Forbes, also a very quick question before I take more questions with both Dr. Virmani and Shaugato here, is on single brand retail. And the government has eased the sourcing norms, cutting edge technology, 3 to 5 years, relaxation being given there. Obviously, Apple is the big beneficiary and Tim Cook should be smiling and be a happy man today. But how do you read this change in policy? At one level, is it very discretionary in sorts? Because many other companies have for years and months now asked for easing of norms, but it has happened only after Apple came calling.
Well, I don't know whether the timing was related directly to the recent visit by the head of Apple, but it's still something that is welcome. What I do like about our policies is that the policies tend to be transparent. We like to go by rules, and we like to make those rules clear and available to everyone at a level playing field. And I think that's a very useful way of approaching policy. Many other countries, I think, have approached things on a purely discretionary basis, where they'd say, "Hey, listen, because it's Apple, I'll say, yes, they're welcome to come in, but because it's Apple, not because I want to change my rule." I think the way we went about it was to say no to Apple first, then change the rule, make it applicable to everyone, and then open things up. I think that's a very much more transparent and level playing field manner of going about things. It's a good thing. It's a good way of doing it.
Dr. Virmani, let me throw this question to you, and Mr. Forbes, do stay with us. The thrust really will be, and whatever little we know, the thrust really will be to push manufacturing, to push the whole agenda of Make in India. Do you believe the reforms that have been undertaken today are going to help in the government achieving that aim?
Yes, definitely. Let me take up both of the sectors you mentioned. I think your question is relevant to both of them. Firstly, defense. In defense, the key issue is IPR, and the critical percentage there is 51%. When we opened up manufacturing itself a decade or more ago, when I was involved in the discussions, this is an issue which came up. They always said it's not 49 or 100, but it's 51, because under the laws of the US and many other countries, 51% is a wholly owned subsidiary. So even though the change which has just been announced today appears to be minor, it drops one item of conditionality, but adds that any other reasons to be recorded. So one of the reasons I hope will be that to allow this 51% subsidiaries into the country, and the proof to me of the pudding, and I can see a lot of FDI coming in if this opening or this change allows these 51% equity holding companies to come into the defense sector. That is one point. The second point on your FDI retail, the issue was there. It's been under consideration. About 6 months ago, when Apple was having problems in China, I had suggested, I had in fact tweeted that we should go all out to attract Apple by easing this specific condition, actually. Because the problem is, and the issue is that a big company which has been operating for, let's say, 10, 15 years in China doesn't really know India, its producers, etc. So it's a very reasonable thing to do, to say, okay, you take 3 years to learn about Indian producers, their capabilities, etc., and then do this 30%. I'm not supporting the 30% norm. It's there. They have to live with it for the time being till we remove it. But given that it is there, I think this issue of allowing flexibility for some of the companies. Now, here when you say modern or frontier, in fact, in something like Apple, it's very simple. It's the companies which have a high proportion of IPR in their sale price. So it's actually relatively easy to determine who these companies are, because there's published balance sheet. You can see what is the cost of production and what is their price, and much of the difference is IPR. So that is cutting edge or modern. So if you say cutting edge, it gets very confusing. But if you define it in terms of IPR, it becomes very simple, straightforward.
Shagata, come in on that. The whole sourcing norm being relaxed, there is finally more clarity. And many will argue that, even when single brand retail was opened up, there was not enough clarity. The whole sourcing norms did make it very, very tough for companies to do business here. I mean, IKEA for months and years has been crying foul. But of course, norms have been changed, and critics will say it has been changed to accommodate Tim Cook's demands when he came on that high-flying visit to India. But the larger question really is that how do you determine what is cutting edge? And is there merit in the argument that Dr. Virmani is making? I mean, some of the stuff that he said about Apple, but at a larger level, how do you determine what is cutting edge?
It is. I mean, this is one of the areas that I completely agree with Dr. Virmani, that it's in modern terms, in modern definitions, IPR is the definition for whatever it's technologically advanced, cutting edge, or whatever. It's essentially IPR. Again, I mean, I'm a little bit ambivalent about the local sourcing norm. I think ultimately one has to move in a direction where, if we are too sincere about our Make in India initiatives, to get some of the retail sort of guys to begin sourcing their equipment. But I completely agree that right from the word go, I mean, it's very, very difficult, given the quality consciousness of many of these companies, the high technologies, the advanced technologies that they use, to start sourcing, to find the appropriate small and medium enterprises which can source. The good thing about these enterprises, when they come in, is that they have a large value ecosystem, and that gets built up gradually.
Now, that's a fair point indeed. They come up with a large value ecosystem that gets built gradually. But Mr. Forbes, let me bring the question back to you. And one of the reasons why the government has done this is because they want stable global money to come into India. They do not want the fly-by-night operators. They don't want the hot, volatile capital that has flooded our markets and something that we do boast of, which is FII money being here. What sort of interest do you think this is going to generate as far as global investors are concerned? I'm not asking you to give me a quantum, but just from a more stable inflow point of view.
I think there's already great interest. I mean, the fact that Tim Cook was in India is a reflection of interest in the Indian market. And I think if Apple actually sets up a manufacturing facility in India, so that we can buy Indian assembled iPhones instead of having to import them, that's only good for the country. And I do agree with the other comments that were made that over time, there will be the development of an ecosystem of suppliers. Now, do local sourcing requirements help? They can help push things along perhaps, but I think it's much more productive to, at the end of the day, it's much more productive to have local sourcing take place because of efficiency, because it's in the interest of the final assembler to actually source locally instead of because of a rule.
Fair point indeed. Dr. Naushad Forbes, on that note, I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much for joining us. But Dr. Virmani and Shaukato, do stay with us because I also do have Ms. Kiran Majumdar-Shaw joining us on the phone line. Hers is an impacted sector by today's move. Can I go across to her? All right, Ms. Shaw, thank you very much for being with us, ma'am. She's joining us all the way from Bengaluru. She's on the phone line with us. How do you read the big decisions on FDI that have been taken today, particularly on pharma, 74% via the automatic route, 100% with government approval? Are you happy with the fact that the brownfield versus greenfield pharma discrimination or differentiation has finally been done away with, something that you've spoken about in the past?
Absolutely. I think this is a very welcome step because I think the Indian pharma sector is a global brand and a very strong brand at that. And I think this previous, FIPB clearances that were required for any kind of investment in brownfield projects was certainly a deterrent to any FDI coming into this sector. This is a sector that needs to be scaled up. This is a sector that needs to be, basically built upon and made even more globally impactful. And I think this is a welcome step. I certainly believe that it is these kind of very proactive and reformist measures that are being taken in policies that are going to see these sectors do even better.
Fair point indeed. And what do you make about the government's very bold decision? I mean, pharma, at least from a security point of view, has never been under threat or under discussion. But what do you make of the government's decision to open up aviation to 100% FDI and also defense on a case-by-case basis? That FDI could also go up to 100%. So you can have the Lockheed Martins of the world to come here and make in India. And I think that's really the big objective. The question is, A, what do you make of this? And do you really expect the big guns to now come calling to India?
Well, certainly I think this sends a very strong signal to the outside world that India is very connected with the global economy and that we are now, our economy is in a strong shape. We are far more confident of what we are doing with all these sectors. I think in the past we have always had concerns around and insecurities really based on insecurities that, we were concerned about FDI in any sector, starting with pharma, where we always believed that, FDI in pharma was going to really impact the drug prices. But I think we need to find ways of dealing with these kind of insecurities because I think in the pharma sector for sure, the drug price control measures that can also be a counter check on these kind of concerns is one way of making sure that other issues can be dealt with in a more mature way. And I think this is the same thing that's happening in aviation. I think aviation is a sector that definitely calls for 100% FDI because this is a sector that, as we all know, is not exactly a financial, darling of any kind of sector. I mean, it is something that drains finances. and I think you need to have FDI coming into the aviation sector. Defense is certainly a sector where we need investment because of the kind of strategies that we've laid out. So, yes, I think we are becoming far more secure of our own future. And India as an economy is certainly gaining a lot of acceptance given the fact that the BRIC economies other than India are not in such a strong shape. So I think this puts us into the forefront. And we must signal to the world that we are a growing economy. We are very confident of our economy. And that is why I think putting to rest the insecurities of the past is a very welcome step.
So before I wrap up things here, I must ask the uncomfortable question, because I think there's a huge thumbs up that's coming for the government on its reform drive. You actually see the market reaction to it. Markets perked up very, very smartly to this move. There's a very positive commentary, not just coming in from Indian industry, but economists like Dr. Vermani and Shaukato Bhattacharya here. But let's begin this round with you, Shaukato, and I'm going to take quick closing comments from all of you. It's very well done that the government has done something like this, but do you believe at one level it was the Brexit that happened on Saturday that kind of pushed the government into changing the narrative here in economic markets or in markets all across India?
Not really, Supriya. I think because these things normally take a lot of time. I mean, there are long discussions. There are hundreds of aspects that go into that one paragraph of policy on civil aviation or pharma or defense. I think a lot of pros and cons have to be looked at. Discussions with various stakeholders, lawyers, the departmental law offices, the law ministry. I mean, there's a huge process that underlies some of this. So I'm not very sure. One possibility is that they might have accelerated the publication of the release that today. It might have come in one week later or so, but not the entire process itself. The process of going about with liberalization takes a long period of time.
Fair point indeed. Kiran, I'm going to have a counter question to you on that. It's a very welcome initiative that the government has taken. But as a member of Indian industry, at some level, do you fear that the Indian operators, whether it's in aviation or whether it's Indian players in defense, could be pygmied by the global guys?
But why are we still so insecure about these kind of happenings? I think business has to be driven by a number of factors. Now, if your business is doing well, I think you will not really be concerned with these kind of fears. I think we have to be very confident. We have to build our economy as a strong economy. I think our Indian businesses have to also stand on their own merit. And I think if it calls for FDI, if it calls for being pygmied, well, that's up to the businesses. I think you have to make sure that you are able to perform very strongly and robustly in a global marketplace. Now, if your industry is based on over-dependent on the domestic consumption, then obviously the kind of FDI that will come in will be of a very different nature. If you are really banking on global business opportunities, then there will be another kind of FDI that will come into play. And then it's up to the Indian business promoter to decide what they want to do with their businesses.
Fair point indeed. Dr. Vermani, a quick closing comment from you. The floodgates have been opened. When do we see the big bucks flow in?
Well, very quickly, 2 points which we haven't made. One is agricultural trade, which I think was approved a little while back but has been now notified. And second, the small change in animal husbandry. It may be small, but I think it can have much more significance than many realize. On the bigger question, I think the important thing to remember is that the whole basis of reform, whether it's FDI or anything else, is to increase competition. And the more competition there is, the stronger our industry grows. I agree completely with Madam who just spoke, my old friend, that competition is good for Indian industry, and this has been proved. This has been proved since 91 at least in India. So the whole idea is to, I think as Naushad mentioned, The problem is this ideology and unsubstantiated concerns, political economy issues, and it's good that the quicker we can get rid of those non-economic factors and introduce more and more competition, the job growth and Indian industry will benefit.
Fair point indeed. But on that note, I've completely run out of time here. Thank you very much, each one of you, for joining us right here on ET Now as we discuss and debate one of the most significant decisions taken on FDI in India.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.